So right now we've got our application that's using the FlatList component to actually create this list of data. And this data is coming to us from the random user generator API. What we want to do now is actually implement a way where we can refresh this list of contacts. And basically all that's going to happen is we're going to use the seed option available to us in the random user API. And that allows us to just specify some preset data, and it can be consistent between different requests. And in this case, we're just going to be passing to the seed option in the URL a number, which is going to start at 1, it can increment to 2 to 3, and so on. And that's all this pull to refresh is going to do. So basically, when we scroll to the top of this list and we pull it once we're already at the top, we'll get that common pull to refresh functionality that we've seen many, many times across many different applications. So to do that, first thing we want to do is actually up in our default state, we're going to create a new option here, and that's going to be refreshing. That's going to be a Boolean, and we'll default that to false. So next thing we want to do is actually go down to our FlatList component. And for the pull to refresh, there's 2 props that we need to add. The first one is going to be refreshing, and that's where we're going to put that Boolean we just set up. So this.state.refreshing. And that's going to tell the FlatList whether it should show the activity indicator, that loading icon, or whether it shouldn't. The other prop we want to add is the onRefresh. And this is going to take a function which we're just going to call handleRefresh, which we'll write in a moment. And that's the function that's going to be called when we make that pull down at the top interaction, and then it'll call this function to actually do whatever we want it to upon refresh. So now we can actually go ahead and write that handleRefresh function. Okay, and this function won't take any arguments. And all we want to do in this case is update 3 pieces of our state. So to do that, we'll say this.setState. Okay, first one's going to be page, and we're saying we want to request the first page always when we're refreshing, because when we've got infinite scroll enabled, we're using that page variable to get future pieces of data. The next thing we want to do is actually change the refreshing state, and we want to set this to true because we're refreshing that. And the final thing we want to do is seed, and this is what we're actually changing. And in this case, since we're just using numbers, we can say this.state.seed, and then we're just going to add 1 to that, and that'll change the seed, and we'll make new requests with that. So once that component state is set, we can pass a callback to this.setState function, and that'll allow us to make a request once we know that the state has been updated. And once the state has been updated, we want to say this.makeRemoteRequest, save that, and that should be all we have to do to actually handle refreshing. Actually, I lied. There's one more thing we need to do, and that's actually in this makeRemoteRequest function. And that's to make sure that we set refreshing back to false upon a successful response or upon a failure to get a response from the API. So if we save that, then we go ahead and actually pull to refresh. You can see that activity indicator showing up, and then once I let go, the API is pretty quick, but you can see that the actual contacts in the list are changing. And that's all it takes to implement pull to refresh within the FlatList component in React Native. If you found this tutorial helpful, make sure to give this channel a subscribe. There's plenty of React Native tutorials coming up.